Hi, I'm Joe. Um, I just wanted to introduce myself and give a little bit of a first update on the Stone Phone project, um, just to sort of give you an idea of where we're at, what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, who I am, and then how hopefully you all can get involved if you want to. So, starting with myself, I'm Joe. I quit school when I was 16, started working as a software engineer, sort of built my career from there, basically self-taught. My last full-time role was as the head of AI at a company, a public company in the US. So sort of software and tech background. I realized I was addicted to my phone, and so I started trying a bunch of different things to get away from it. It was particularly for me, it was Twitter that I was addicted to. I actually had one of these phones, the Samsung, actually this phone, Samsung Z Fold, which was at the time my favorite piece of technology I'd ever owned. Then I realized I was addicted, so I switched sort of cold turkey to this, which is a Unihertz Atom. It's a 2-inch screen. And for the first couple of days, it's horrible, and then it was amazing. I loved it. It has a couple of issues though, like Bluetooth sucks, camera sucks, and the version of Android, and it's just a little bit too small. The 2-inch screen was just too small. So this was a pretty great experience. I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't there. So I started trying other things. I got this, which is a Sawyer's, I think. I can't remember what it is, but it just didn't bear using. It wasn't, just doesn't really work. Then I switched, so I daily drove the Unihertz Atom for about 6 months. Then I switched to this, which was a Q9 Mini, or is a Q9 Mini. I daily drove this for a couple of months. This is pretty good. This is a 4-inch screen, basically the perfect size for me. Not too heavy, not too thin, not too thick. Problem with this, dodgy Bluetooth again, no fingerprint sensor, and there's no NFC, so no Google Pay, and the camera sucks. Uh, I tried to use this Sony Xperia that lots of people recommended, but it's just if you buy a new one, the software is too out of date to even update, so it doesn't work. And now I'm daily driving just to test the Unihertz Jelly Max, which is kind of good. It's just too thick and the screen is too big. The cameras aren't that great, really. They're better, but they're not that great. I think mostly a software thing. So I've tried a bunch of stuff. I know I really want a small phone, and none of the existing phones out there are really doing it for me. Um, there's also a slightly separate long-term thing, and this might make some people's eyes glaze over, but for me, I'm really a sort of my background's AI. I am interested in sort of longer term than just solving this initial problem. I'm longer term interested in what does it mean to reduce our dependence on screens even further than just going to a small screen. I really don't want in uh, 10 years to be living in a world where everybody's walking around like this, or even with a foldable phone like this. I don't want people to have screens in their glasses. I think that sounds really dystopian to me. What I would like is a Star Trek type future where you're wearing a badge and you can tap it and say, hello, I'd like to book an Uber to wherever, or even on a smartwatch or something. And so I have a prototype, which I'll share another video of another time, where I can sort of press the little action button on this Unihertz Atom and say, book me an Uber to Heathrow Airport in my case, and it will book me an Uber knowing exactly where I am. And I can actually have multiple of those going on at once. So it doesn't sort of block the phone, so I can still use the phone, but I can still check in, if that makes sense. So that's a really interesting use case that I'm exploring as part of this. But that's more long term than let's just in the initial term build a phone that's actually good, got decent battery life, decent performance, small screen, not too thick, a decent camera. And then there are a few other things as well. So just to quickly run you through the current specs I'm looking at, and I'll share this as a doc as well. Just the sort of high level pieces. 4 to 5 inch screen. I prefer the lower end. I'm not super stuck on the aspect ratio, but because of the availability of screens, we're a bit limited there. And then an OLED, hopefully. I think we're probably going to have to be on the low end of the refresh rate. I don't think we're going to get a 120 hertz refresh rate, just because that doesn't really exist right now, the component. We'd need much bigger scale to be able to do that. In terms of SoC, like a MediaTek Dimensity 7 series, probably 7030 plus, 7350 maybe, or 7350, just because that's required for some of the better ISP camera stuff. Cameras are actually an interesting thing. That's where a lot of the incumbents have a big gap in software, where the open source software is just not good enough for giving good camera stuff. Thankfully, my background's in AI, so I'm not so worried about that, but there's going to be quite a lot of there's going to be a time thing for building that software out, so that we're going to have hardware that has an okay camera, but it's not going to be a good camera until we've done a few months worth of software updates. RAM, 8 gig. I don't think that matters too much for this type of device. Expandable storage up to a terabyte. With Because of that, we can get away with, I think, like 120 gig, 128 gig of on-device storage. Not so fast about that. Rear camera, 50 megapixels with image, OIS stabilization. Really good lens, good camera, like an ISL GN1 or something. And then selfie camera, front-facing camera, like a 43.7 megapixel camera is what I'm looking at. An ISOCELL GH1 with a decent lens again. So really going for good cameras, but only one rear camera. I think that by the sounds of it is first of all saves on space internally and externally, but also I don't think most of us need a really like good big range of cameras. But you get back to me on that and tell me if I'm wrong. Battery range, my experience with the Q9 Mini, the Unihertz Atom, and the Jelly Max. The Jelly Max, I think, has gone too hard on battery for me. I don't use my phone that much, and it makes it really thick. I think 3,500 milliamp hours will be decent, like pretty good, at least a day and a half on a 4-ish inch screen. But happy to have pushback on that. Needs wireless charging, obviously. So probably 15-watt wireless charging, USB Type C, obviously, with sort of fast charging, probably 25 watts ish. Uh, I don't, I personally don't want a headphone jack because it really affects the waterproofing rating. I understand for some people it's quite important. So I think if we're going with wireless charging, but then also with a USB-C port, there's a little bit of hardware to it, but we can basically make the USB-C to headphone jack really high quality. You just dedicate a chip for it, but that's very doable. It's very cheap. And then that'll mean that we can have a USB-C to headphone jack add-on that makes that connection really, really good. So I'm thinking go for that, but again, come back to me. What I've heard is that the speakers are quite important because a lot of people use their small phones to just have a video or a podcast or something going on in the background. So decent compact speakers. We're a little bit limited because of the size, but that's doable. Fingerprint scanner, side mounted. I've had various phones with fingerprint scanners. The Jelly Max has it on the back. The Atom has it on the bottom. I don't like either of them. The one I really like is the Z Fold, the side mounted. I think that's really nice. And then also there's this Samsung a cheap one, like a $99 phone, and that's sort of side mounted, which I really like as well. I know some people don't like the side mounted, but I think honestly it's just superior for me. So again, each their own. Needs all the sensors, accelerometer, gyroscope, magnetometer, blah blah blah. Needs 5G, Wi-Fi 5, Bluetooth 5, NFC obviously for Google Pay, GPS and all the other like variants, GLONASS and Galileo. Um, Dual SIM, maybe dual eSIM or just one eSIM and one micro SIM, but definitely dual SIM and with at least one eSIM. Um, should support Android 15. And then when we're talking a little bit about support and software, I think obviously long-term support for this is really important. We're all buying a phone because we don't want to buy a new one in 5 years or in 2 years' time. 5 years' time might be okay. This is where actually the pricing comes in because we need to sell a device for enough money that we have enough money set aside to pay for a lot of the security updates because there are these services. It's kind of complicated. I can go into that in another video maybe. But yeah, so that the support is something we can decide up front, and I think at least 2 versions of Android, major versions of Android, and then security updates for 5 years makes sense. Excuse me. So that's definitely something that I'm aiming for. Materials then would be durable, so like an aluminium alloy frame, and then Corning Gorilla Glass front and back. I think we all want something that's going to last for 5 years, so that's pretty important. So I'll link to the specs in more detail that I'm aiming for, but these are all still flexible. One of the things that's hard, and I'm sure you can imagine that it's hard building a smartphone. Basically, the process is sort of we have someone in China, like an agent in China, that goes around and talks to all the different factories, So we've got that. Phoebe, who's actually in this community, is great. She's on the ground and helping out a lot with figuring out what the factories will do and won't do. Um, what is hard is those factories, they come up with a minimum order quantity like 5,000. And so we have to buy 5,000 devices or 3,000 devices. And so first of all, we need the money up front to put in that order. So that's where a Kickstarter pre-sale campaign comes in. There's more about that I can share. Um, but when the factories are considering what the minimum order quantity should be, and even once they've done that, and maybe they have a few different projects, all for about the same amount of money, all for about the same minimum order quantity, they're thinking, what's my opportunity cost? If I take this project and do 3,000 upfront now, are they going to come back and order 10,000 in 3 months' time? Or are they going to come back and order no more? Or are they going to come back and order 100,000? So part of this process isn't just getting quotes from factories, it's also convincing them that we're going to sell a lot of this device. And because it's quite an unusual device, we're getting a little bit of pushback on that from the factories. So that means that even more so than normal, we have to front load the the crowdfunding, at least the crowd sort of vibe. So we have a lot of people who will commit to buying the phone, even if it's not as part of the initial order. If we can come back to the factory and say, look, we've got 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 people who have all explicitly said they would buy it, and maybe even have paid $1 to confirm they would buy it. That's just another trick that they use. We can get a much better price and be more likely to get the factory to actually build the device for us. So I've shared the specs. That's in the description as well, so you should be able to see that. The target specs, they're still flexible. What we need next, and what I'm focusing my time on, is how do we get a big old email list of people who have confirmed they would back it on Kickstarter, because we need to have that before we even start the Kickstarter. Maybe spent $1 to reserve their slot, and then we can use that upfront data before we run the Kickstarter to get quotes and things from the factory in more detail, so they'll actually confirm and do some initial research for us. And then we can take that to the Kickstarter. So that's a little bit of a chaotic video, I know, but I've been putting off doing this, and I really wanted to do it so that you all knew where we were at. I really appreciate everybody's sort of contribution so far, all the people that have responded to my DMs and commented on the Reddit post and had video calls with me, so thank you. I'm pushing on this. I really want to have a that's doesn't suck. And yeah, so in the meantime, if you're sort of interested in this project, I guess subscribe and like the video, I guess. And please keep engaging with the stuff on Reddit, because that's really helpful for me with the figuring out how to market this and excuse me, and get this out to people. But then also you can go to stonephone.co, again, link in the description, and you can click the reserve button. Like, we haven't confirmed the stats, but this is sort of a statement of intent to prove that this is something that we actually want, and we are willing to put our money where our mouths are, and that it is something that's worth me spending 6 months of my life working on, and getting these factories to start. So very much starting as I mean to go on, with involving community and making it not just my project but our project. Yeah, so sorry for the ramble, sorry for the coughs. I'm a little bit sick, but I'm really excited for this project, and I think we can make something really cool that we actually want to use every day, and that hopefully we can start convincing other people to use small phones. That's it. I'm Joe. Nice to meet you all.